Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with me, Christian Harris. I'm really pleased to be joined today by Lawrence Webb, who is this year's IOSH President. If you remember, we had Louise on last year during her presidential year. So it's great to have Lawrence on this week and hear about his priorities for the year ahead and his focus on preventing harm, which is a message, if you follow anything that I do, that you know resonates very much with me. We talk about what it feels like to be in that presidential role and the weight of responsibility, but also the great opportunities that brings. We talk about Lawrence's priorities for the year, including prevention, neurodiversity, building the profession of OSH into the future, etc. And we also talk a little bit about his day job in the construction world as well. Really enjoyed this conversation. Lots of what Lawrence says really resonates with me, and I'm sure it will with you as well. And do, if you're listening to this in advance of this date, attend the IOSH strategy session on the 20th of March, where they're presenting their new 5-year strategy. And Lawrence mentions a few other upcoming webinars and events that you can engage with and meet him and the presidential team as well. Let's get into the conversation then with myself and Lawrence Webb. Hope you enjoy it. See you on the other side. Cheers.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Thanks for joining me today, Lawrence.
It's an absolute pleasure. I'm really pleased to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, it's good. This is hopefully turning into an annual tradition now, because we had Louise on last year to talk about her presidential goals and aspirations and all that fun stuff. So we'll have to lay down the marker and turn this into an annual thing.
Yeah, no, that's great actually, because it is a good opportunity for us to talk about our focus areas, but also update all of your listeners with what we've been up to and how things are moving forward. So it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. And I love doing as much as I can with IOSH, because it's a great organisation. I do a lot of talks and all that fun stuff in the branches. So yeah, let's give it. I'm sure most of the listeners are members anyway, but you never know. You might sign up the odd member as well.
Well, that would be good.
Exactly. So to start with, I mean, just your reflections, I suppose, on how does it feel to be IOSH President, because you've got kind of a lot of weight on your shoulders, I suppose, which could bring with it sort of opportunities, or it could bring with it kind of challenges. So I'd be interested to get your perspective on how it feels. Was it what you expected, and how it's all going so far?
Yeah, it's I mean, you'd expect me to say this, but it's genuine when I sort of do say that it is an absolute honour to know that you've got key representatives from the membership behind you and believe that you can sort of lead them for a year. But it's such a huge gig. I mean, it's funny because I know Louise really well, and I've known Jimmy. In fact, I've known all the majority of the last sort of 10, 15 presidents anyway. And I used to work with Lawrence Waterman, and they've all said something very similar to me in the past, and that is, you don't know what it's really like until you're sort of sitting in that seat. And it is an absolutely huge. It is a huge gig, and as you say, there's a lot of responsibility and a lot of expectation. But the one thing I think that's really important to remember is, I mean, from my perspective, it isn't the Lawrence Webb show. There's a lot of people involved in the presidential side of things. I mean, we've got a presidential team, of which obviously that's where my sort of presidential ambassadorial piece comes from. But then you're also chair of IOSH Council as well, and when you've got so much talent and so much experience in the room at once, all looking to you as the chair to keep things on track and try and get the best out of everybody, it is absolutely huge. But I'm absolutely loving it. I mean, it's something I've had an eye on for years, but never sort of really thought that someone like myself would find myself in this position. But it's really hard work, but incredibly rewarding. And I just hope after my year that people look back and say, yeah, that guy made a difference, you know, and it was worth it. So yeah, loving every minute.
Good. When you said you weren't sure or you couldn't see someone like yourself getting to the, I mean, what did you mean by that, if you wouldn't mind sort of elaborating on that a bit?
Yeah, I've always been someone who, I mean, for those who know me and have seen me over a 30-year career, you'll know that, you know, being in the limelight, standing on a stage, standing in front of the cameras, doing whatever that sort of side of things is that I have to do, I have no problem with that at all. It doesn't faze me in the slightest. But I've also been very happy to be in the background, and I've volunteered for IOSH for 20 years, but quietly in the background doing lots of different things. I mean, been on council, obviously, you know, been a member of the presidential team, but before that, I was on the professional standards committee.
Yeah.
I've helped develop materials. I've helped do research for IOSH, all sorts of things, but it's been very much sort of back of house. So I never really thought I would get the opportunity to be that front and center, because I'm happy to, I'm a team player. I'm happy to be part of a team. I really enjoy being part of a team. I enjoy leading a team, but also, you know, enjoy sitting back and letting other people do that as well. And I just didn't think that the opportunity would come to me until a few people sort of said, look, you know, I think it's your time, and it's really important that you give yourself the opportunity and have faith in yourself in terms of how people see you. And here I am. So what an honor.
No, that's great. And something that came to my mind as you were talking then was the notion of the spotlight. So I always, like you, I'm very comfortable, you know, doing all this kind of stuff and talking at webinars and on stages and all this stuff. But I think people would be surprised to hear that actually I'm quite introverted and I'm quite shy at, you know, like a networking event. I don't really find that very comfortable, for example. But anyway, the point I was going to make is that for me, it's not about being in the spotlight. It's about shining the spotlight. It's about being the spotlight. And that kind of rang true from what you were saying. You know, you know, you're happy to sort of play your role, but it's not about being in the spotlight. It's about you being the spotlight and shining the light on what these important issues that we all need to address.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, we've probably all done very similar management and leadership training over the years, and I've seen how things work really well, and I've seen how perhaps they don't work so well. And the one thing I've always been really happy with is the fact that as a leader, you need to understand the people around you and be able to draw them out, to give them the opportunity to you know, have their time at the front, or to be one of those people running around at the back. And you know, I'm as happy to make the tea and go and buy the biscuits and the sandwiches as I am to be the person to drink it and eat it all. So I think that's really important, because you need to know when it's time to step forward, and you need to know when it's time to you know, step back into the line, or even step back behind the line and allow others to move forward. And I have no problem whatsoever in putting my hand up and saying, you know, I need help, or recognizing that there's people who are better than me at certain things, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. And this role is very much about all of those things. So the ambassadorial side is very much, you know, being part of a team of ambassadors. We're all in it together. We're all a team. And then, you know, chair of council is really just about giving a bit of direction and structure, but allowing the talent that sits in council, that's there on behalf of the membership, to do what they do, because that's why they're there. So it isn't the Lawrence Webb show, and I'm really happy with that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Although there is an advantage to buying the biscuits, because then you can choose the right ones. You know, there's nothing worse than people choosing the wrong type of biscuits. You know.
No, that's right. Well, you don't get a set of hamster-like chops by not buying the biscuits, I guess. So, but you know, I've said I was fortunate enough to be out at the West Africa division.
Yeah, I saw that.
In Ghana just a month or so ago, and I set the challenge to the people in the room and said, which one of you, you know, wants to be the first president from this particular part of the world? Because you've all got it in you. You've all got that sort of potential. You just need to give yourself a chance to let that shine, and hopefully there'll be others around you that will support you in doing so. So, you know, leaders can come from anywhere. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely right. So let's take a step back then slightly and think sort of bigger picture a bit around the world of occupational safety and health. I mean, how do you see the landscape at the moment within the profession, if that's the right word, or the sector, or the whatever you call it. And then how's that kind of been changing over the last, say, 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I think the one thing I've always struggled with in doing this job, and I've done it for 30 years, is that we're an enabling profession. I can't think of any other profession that has got the outreach. I mean, in terms of the sort of the breadth and the depth of what we can potentially get involved with. I mean, everything from, sort of, physics, geography, chemistry, biology, all the way through to different facets of engineering. We look at different aspects of the law, psychology, sociology. The list is absolutely endless, and we're absolutely in the perfect place to influence all employing organisations and other organisations to do their absolute best by their people. And what I've noticed in the last 10 years is that sort of stigma that comes with what people think we do, compared to what they've seen us do. And COVID was still is, unfortunately, a great example where we really can influence and facilitate good in organisations. And my hope is that, having demonstrated just how effective we can be and how we're essential to the workings of any organisation, that's exactly where I want us to sit, because there's always been a challenge of things like parity, equity. I mean, I'll talk a little bit later, hopefully, about eliminating harm. But on a transferable and scalable level in any organisation, no matter how small, even if it's just 1 or 2 people, through to the huge corporates we deal with. And in the last 5 to 10 years, I've found that people are much more open to engaging and listening and taking on board what we're saying. And I things like COVID, unfortunately, come around and prove our worth, and we absolutely stepped up to the mark. And now that we've got OSH as a fundamental principle and human right in the workplace, and of course, social sustainability is very much gaining traction as well, where others can see the benefit that comes with us. My only fear is that we will go back to the way things were 30 years ago, where we're seen as disenablers, because that isn't what we do. And if that's how people see us, we're not doing it right.
Yeah, couldn't agree with you more there. I mean, I often say that there's never been, in my opinion, a better time to work in this space, because I think, as you've identified there, albeit it wasn't the reason we would have wanted it to happen, the pandemic has shone a light on what the profession can do and the value that it can bring. And so I think the influence you can have has never been greater. Even thinking about working from home and mental health is becoming more and more important. So I just think that there's never been a better opportunity to really make a difference.
Yeah, and I think the workplace has obviously changed for more than just the COVID reasons, but I think we've changed as a profession as well. If you look at the fact that people always saw us as being the technical and the sort of scientific type experts in all that side of things, as we've grown as a profession in our core skills, our leadership skills, and all those sort of other capabilities, it's made it easier, I think, for us to work alongside others and influence them to a greater degree than perhaps we used to be able to. And behaviours, the power of understanding behaviours, for me, has always been the key to good OSH. It's never been about endless pieces of paperwork and everything else. It's about good management, understanding people, and getting people to understand people, because people don't set out to sort of cause disaster and loads of paperwork and lots of tutting and rolling of eyes. That's not why they go into the workplace. But they do have a right to go in and then go home again in the same state, or if not a better state, whether that's physical, mental, or anything else, to be honest. And we're key to making that happen. And we know that good people, happy people in organisations equals good business and productive business. So the no-brainer for me. So we need to keep that momentum going. It's really important.
Yeah, I liked your challenge to your colleagues in West Africa, and I'd put a challenge out there to the OSH profession, which is, I'd love to see, and I believe it should and can and will happen, somebody from this background being the CEO of choice, not the finance director being made the CEO, if you know what I mean. Because I think
Yeah,
all
yeah,
those things you've said, because remember that we also have to touch on all this finance stuff as well, because we have
absolutely. Yeah,
P&Ls and insurance and all, I just think actually it's the best proving ground you could have to lead a business, particularly, as you say, in this era where things like compassion and empathy and sustainability and so on are much more important to staff, customers, partners, other stakeholders.
yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting about what you say there is the fact that I spent some time when I left university, we'll just say some time ago, I spent some time in a sales job,
Mm,
a couple of years in selling construction equipment, and that was an absolutely fantastic opportunity that really only occurred to me after probably 6 months, that what I was learning wasn't just about sales, it was about people.
mm,
It was understanding people and understanding how to talk to people and how to respond to people and how to influence people and negotiate with people and all those really, really good things. And then I moved into a role where it was almost, at the time it didn't seem like it, but looking back now, it's a natural progression into lecturing,
mm.
because it's a very similar thing. You're doing something quite different, but actually lecturing is almost like sales. It's a shop window thing again, and it's very much about dealing with people and engaging with people and trying to sort of keep them motivated and interactive, but getting a point across where you're helping to teach them, but if you've got any sense about you, you'll be sucking up every bit of learning at the same time in your direction as well. And those two things for me have been such a massive foundation to everything that I've done since, because again, it comes back to people
Yeah.
and understanding people. And you're absolutely right. The OSH profession, for those who are first careerers and have got really high aspirations for the future, it's absolutely a great proving ground, because if you look, as I said earlier, at the breadth and the depth of what we do and the fact we're everywhere in organisations doing all sorts of things, and we have to have a really sound knowledge of all the operational stuff that makes businesses tick. And in my day job now, as someone who's been looking at strategy for the last 7 or 8 years, that operational knowledge and that experience is absolutely essential to be able to think strategically as well, because it's great having that sort of really wide vision and that long-term vision and understanding how to develop strategy and get people on board and what it means to be a stakeholder. You also need to be able to put your operational hat back on to think, so what's it like to be the person that's going to get all this strategic stuff landed on my lap and told to
Yeah.
do it in a particular timescale? So being able to do both I think is really, really useful. And this profession gives you that opportunity. It's a really good point. I like that.
Yeah. One of the things I'm really interested in is, you said it earlier, and it just rolled off your tongue because you know it's true, is firming up that link between safety and business performance. Because I feel that there's a lot of platitudes around safety. Many companies will say, safety's our number one priority and all of this stuff, but
Yeah.
they talk the talk but don't necessarily walk the walk. And I think sort of cementing that link through, more data and evidence and stories and case studies. And, I've mentioned this before on the podcast. It's something that I've got a sort of bugbear in the back of my mind. I've got to focus more time and effort on working with and collaborating with people to try and just draw out more of these lessons and stories. Because I think you and I know it instinctively that it's true, but there's still sometimes a challenge you get about getting investment, isn't there, when investing to prevent something from happening? How do you prove you prevented it and all this other stuff?
Yeah, I mean, better data equals better decision making. And I think the diversity that you get in a team to look at that data in different ways from different perspectives, I think that's hugely powerful. And you are right. I've spent a lot of time talking about eliminating harm. It's a journey that I've been on personally for 5 or 6 years. And sometimes the challenge is, well, how do you know that you have eliminated that harm? How do you know it was ever going to exist? I've had all of this before, but at the end of the day, ultimately, people, in my opinion, are your most important asset.
Mm.
So who wouldn't want to step on the journey to try and eliminate harm wherever you can, rather than starting further down the control hierarchy and say,
Yeah.
well, we'll put a management system in, we'll give them a pair of ear defenders to make them look like deputy dog. You know, everyone will have a laugh about that, but it will protect their hearing. You're missing the point. Those things are on top of the fact that, have you really challenged yourself to see whether you've done everything you can to eliminate harm? Because your people are that most important asset. So why would you not want to do that?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, you're talking to somebody who firmly believes that too, and the challenges in my area are well, they vary, but you have some organisations who seem to sort of just accept that slip and fall accidents are a cost of doing business, and you're going to get some claims, and you just kind of build it into the P&L and just sort of roll with the punches. Or through to the other extreme, which is people that don't really think it's that serious and think it's a bit funny, and everything in between. So it's certainly trying to get people to be more preventative, and I know that's one of your big passions and focuses for the year is definitely a great conversation.
It's a healthy challenge I'm taking into everyone that I'm talking to, and it's something I've also done in my day job. Within Costain for some time, and we have a whole strategic approach based around it now. And do you know what, you can apply it to so many different things. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to actually understand that you can apply that principle to everything from, obviously, safety, health, then you've got quality, then you've got engineering, then you've got supply chain, procurement, you name it, because harm can mean so many different things. But basically subscribing to that as a key fundamental principle means that if you're trying to reduce your carbon emissions, if you're going for net zero, if you're going for always leaving the landscape, the environment around you in a better way than you actually engage with it, then what you're trying to do is eliminate harm, right? It's the same thing. It's just that I particularly want to focus that on people as a fundamental principle, and it's really important.
What are some of the challenges that you've had experienced or kind of maybe overcome over the years with sort of non-OSH professionals' attitudes towards that approach? Is that something you've come across as a bit of a hurdle?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've had scenarios in other businesses, not the one I'm in now. I'm very fortunate in that my business, does what it says on the tin, and it's got that sort of family feel about it, where everybody fully appreciates the importance of the person standing next to them. But I've worked in other organisations where that just hasn't been the case at all, and it's a constant battle to explain that just because something hasn't happened doesn't mean it's not going to. That constant battle of the fact that, no, I'm not telling you this because if you don't do it, you're going to go to prison. People who can blow those things so out of proportion, almost like a defence mechanism. It's especially difficult with those organisations who don't have that bad track record, and of course, I don't want businesses to have a bad track record. It's a fantastic place to be in, but what you tend to find is, for those who are so fixated on that as being their sort of key driver, it drives an open and honest culture underground, and you find that it's absolutely not a psychologically safe environment for people to say, oh, I've just something's just happened to me. No one wants to know about it, because this is not the business where that takes place. And ultimately, any organization with people in is always going to have that oops moment, because we are not perfect. It would be great to say we are, but we're absolutely not. And those are the biggest struggles I've had with people who are run by data in its entirety and don't see the real world around them. They just see those figures on a bit of paper, and it keeps saying 0, 0, 0, 0. Therefore, everything must be hunky dory, and that's been a challenge in the past. I think we're making huge inroads there, and especially by educating people in those situations which have happened to others, but then joining the dots. Again, it's that facilitation role in joining the dots between what we can see as being those golden threads and what perhaps others can't, and showing how this quite quickly, within seconds, can mean you go from being heroes to zeros, which is not what anyone wants. So that's always been a personal challenge I've set myself.
What are some of the things you're doing then in your presidential year around promoting that? How are you sort of what strategies or tactics you're going to employ to try and kind of get that message out there among
Yeah,
the community?
great question. Great question. Really important, because 12 months is not long.
No.
So there's a few things that occurred to me when I was fortunate enough to become president elect. I mean, the first thing is to realise that this is a 3-year job.
Yeah.
Because obviously president-elect president, then immediate past president. So you need to work really closely with the president-elect, with the president as the president-elect, to start finding where those golden threads are, because you need consistency, and the membership are owed that consistency in value and approach and key themes. And when I was developing mine, the one thing I was very mindful of is IOSH's own strategy, because I know in my day job, if I want something to land, it needs to align strategically, because that's how things happen. So I developed a plan early doors, and also worked with the presidential support team to think about a comms plan. Because the other important thing is, whatever you pick, you need to make sure it's being woven into everything you're doing. So I, apart from the eliminating harm side we've already talked about, I'm looking at 3 other things which I think resonate with most people. And the first one is thinking about the next generation of OSH professionals. What are we doing to attract them? What are we doing to support them? Bearing in mind they bring a different way of thinking, a different set of expectations, some really healthy challenges, which for dinosaurs like me, you really have to sit and think about, because it just isn't the way that you've considered things before. I think that's really healthy. But we need to encourage them into the discipline and get as many first careerers as we can, but for those who've done other things, appeal to them to bring their talent and skills they've already got into the OSH profession. So lots with future leaders, lots with that side of things. The second thing is thinking about what you might call grassroots OSH, which is making sure that not just our profession, but other like-minded professions remember that 80% of the hard yards get done by the organisations who aren't those big corporates with the cultures and the strategy and all those other things in place. They're the supply chains, the sort of wider ecosystem at a number of different levels that can go down to 1 or 2 people in a very small workshop at the back of somebody's garden who do an absolutely essential piece of work, but they're so far removed from the actual corporate that all of this lines into, that they get forgotten. And I don't want that, because whatever we do, it's got to be scalable and it's got to be adaptable. And we can't forget that those people are an absolutely key part of the process. And then the last thing is a personal one for me, is neurodiversity, because something like, depending on which reports you read, but the most recent one I read was something like 10% of the population is neurodiverse, as recognised by definition. But we're all different, right?
Yeah.
You and I, we've got a lot of things in common. I've followed you for sort of many years in different things, and a lot of what you say is similar to me, but we're still different people.
Yeah.
And we think differently. We've got different backgrounds. But what I'm thinking of is making sure that as a profession, we're taking the opportunity not just to recognise that there's neurodiversity out there, but to embrace it as another set of powers that we've actually got in our tool bag. Because my daughter's got autism, for example, and there's some things that they just don't make sense to her, but actually she's brilliant in other ways that really makes me think. And I've had to learn to be a different person to be able to interact and work with her. And she's got a brilliant set of skills which I can see, but I know others can't. And it's the same in the workplace. So I want to make sure that whatever we do as IOSH and as a profession, that we're remembering that in the way, for example, we communicate. Yep. So sometimes, lots and lots of information, lots and lots of text, hardly any pictures, all the great stuff that we used to love to do in a huge, great reports and what have you. No, that's not going to appeal to people generally. And if you're neurodiverse, it's even more difficult. So thinking about all of those sorts of things and engaging as much as we can. And all of this is included in my comms plan. So, for example, you'll see some webinars coming out soon where we're actually going to look at neurodiversity and think about what it means in the OSH profession. And we'll be hearing from some people where that is their life, that is their diagnosis, but how brilliantly they've actually brought their career forward, and how much value they're adding to us, and what we need to do to make the most of that. So we've got some webinars there. The Eliminating Harm Challenge goes out to everywhere I go, branches, networks, organisations. I'm always reminding people about that 80% who are doing the hard yards in terms of the supply chain. And future leaders, myself and Stuart Hughes, who's the next president incoming, president-elect now, we're already thinking about what's that golden thread that we need between him and me, so that when I start to move on and he picks things up, what is it that we can put in place now to make sure the foundations are there? So, as I say, I think the membership are owed that consistency, and hopefully we'll do a good job.
And it's how you get stuff done as well, isn't it? I mean, I always say this to people when they talk to me about doing, I want to do a campaign about slip, strips and falls, let's say. So last quarter we did manual handling, and now we want to do slip, strips and falls. And I say, well, that's great that you want to focus on it, but actually you'd be better off having something more consistent as running through as a thread over a longer period of time, because it short, sharp and snappy, can make a point, but actually it doesn't necessarily get embedded in the brain in the same way. And so you could see a spike of improvement, but then that's going to sort of end up tailing off as a long tail over time. And so thinking about that consistency of messaging, and as you say, like tweaking it slightly is fine, but you wouldn't want to go from this year it's all about prevention and next year it's all about let's let everything happen and just defend insurance claims for, not that you would, but just two ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me laugh when people say, "Yeah, we've done health and safety." What? Sorry, say that again. Yeah, we've done that this month. Next month, we're going to do something completely different. And it's important with presidents. If you look at what some of Louise did, for an example, there were elements of the comms and what have you that Jimmy started. There's elements of what I'm doing, especially looking at neurodiversity, which feed into what Louise was doing in terms of opening the conversations about EDI generally. More diversity and looking
and empathy as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people who say, well, in 12 months, yes, we've done that. You can't possibly do that. But if we can get people talking about it and remembering it as one of those themes of conversation going forward, and you haven't done it yet, I think that's a really great start. As long as we keep coming back and reminding people about what we said and what we've done, and what gets measured gets managed. So you need to keep it on dashboards. You need to keep it on people's mind and keep that conversation going.
Yeah, it's finding that balance, isn't it, between measuring enough and, as you said earlier, not going overboard with data and being fixated on the data. But equally, if you go the other way and you don't have any data at all, then that's quite hard to track your progression. So yeah, it's kind of figuring out that sensible, pragmatic middle ground.
No, it is, and having that balance in the type of data as well. So again, in my day job as Chief Strategy Director in Costain, we have a dashboard where 80% of our metrics are all leading. They're leading indicators that are designed to drive behaviour and see what's coming towards us, rather than driving your car by looking in your rear view mirror. That's fine with your lagging metrics, but you're going to drive into something pretty quickly if you don't keep your eyes forward. So we've always done that, and as you say, striking that balance, but again, understanding how to make these things behaviourally sound so they have the impact you want, the desired impact, not the undesired impact, which unfortunately does sometimes come with metrics, as we all know.
Indeed. So you touched a bit about on the IOSH strategy, and there's going to be an update on the 20th, isn't there? About that. Can you give us a bit of a sneak peek?
What I can say is this: I don't want to spoil the surprise for anybody who hasn't seen it already. So we've started to have some sessions for the network volunteers, and obviously the presidential team, council, and IOSH themselves have seen it.
Yeah,
I think what's really exciting, and what I think members and other wider stakeholders are going to be pleased about, is that it feels different. It feels modern. It sort of reflects where the profession is going, and it mops up so many things that that the members, are so important for in IOSH. I mean, they're absolutely the blood of the institution. They are that sort of heartbeat, and it just feels as a series of principles. And I've seen the sort of the documents, and I know the other things that are coming, and I'm trying so hard not to give any of it away. But the thing is, when you talk to people in IOSH now, you can tell they're bought into this, because the way that they're talking to you and the positivity around where we're going next for the 5 years has clearly landed really well. And I mean, there's been a lot of consultation done.
Yeah.
People from IOSH, lots of stakeholders in terms of different sort of client groups and employer groups and what have you, and obviously within council, and they've listened a lot to the membership, and that's really clear as well. Work 2022 got us from where we needed to get to where we needed to be, and what's coming next is absolutely going to set the next 5 years. But you can see the direction is now shifting to a professional membership organisation that people are absolutely going to want to be a part of.
Yeah.
And what I'm pleased about is that within the sort of structure and within the intent of what it says and its strategic indicators, you can just see that there's some great drives and aspirations for the future, and I think it's aimed exactly where it needs to be for the modern world, and I'm hoping everyone will see that same thing on the 20th and onwards. So I can't wait to start waving some stuff around, but I'm not allowed yet.
No, good stuff. Well, yeah, I've registered for the update on the 20th, so I'll be looking forward to that. So we just want everyone to get behind it. Some great messages, some great structure, and as someone who is strategic in the day job, I can see exactly where this is going and what the purpose is, and I hope the membership in particular are going to be really happy with what they see. Good stuff. You mentioned the day job, so let's talk a little bit about that. And you mentioned being strategic, but how would you see? You gave a good overview of the kind of OSH profession and the landscape there. How would you see kind of drilling down into construction? Any similarities or differences that are particular to that sector?
Well, I think, I mean, really, I don't know what the percentage is. Let's just say, I don't know, 50%. I've just made that up, but let's just say 50% of the challenges that everybody has in whatever sector they work in are quite similar.
Yep.
If you look at the work that you sort of focus on, everywhere you go, the basic hazard, the risks and what have you, exactly the same. I think the thing with construction, though, is that sometimes the industry gets compared with others that are very repetitive in their nature, because they have to be to get done what they do. No 2 days are the same in construction. In fact, no 2 half days are the same, because if they are and everything stops, then something's got horribly wrong.
Yeah.
So I mean, you've got just about every different hazard background you can possibly imagine, and we. If you look at the definition of construction, and I was saying this in the IOSH construction group the other week that I also sit in, is that we really do have an outreach into every other sector as well, which at some point in time will do a form of construction work, no matter how minor or major. So I mean, there's a lot of overlap with construction and other sectors, and I like the opportunity of being able to sort of point that out to people and give them examples where they wouldn't see themselves being related to construction at all. And there's a particular a culture that you see in construction where generally, and this isn't the case everywhere, but generally it's been male dominated until relatively recently, and I'm really pleased to see we're getting that diversity in everything we do now, because as I said earlier, more diverse people make better decisions. And I'm noticing that the industry is changing, but those hazards are still there, which is why eliminating harm is just so important, because we have an opportunity as an industry to design things out at the earliest possible opportunity, and not everybody does. So there's a lot of there's a lot of opportunities for us. I think we need to make the most of.
Yeah,
It's
great
the
point
variation.
about being able to design out, actually, because yeah, you are physically constructing, you're making stuff, and therefore you can make it in the best possible way if you think about it strategically and carefully.
Yeah, and it's a great challenge to put out there to your clients and your customers as well, in asking them, ultimately, what is it that you want to see? Well, they want to see X, right? Can we offer you an alternative? Well, that's still exactly what you're going to get, but what we can tell you is that in the long term, it's going to be cheaper to run, or
Hmm.
it's going to be safer to maintain,
Yeah,
or the health and the well-being of the people actually using this facility, this asset, whatever it is going to be hugely improved. So we're working really hard to try and get people to look at alternatives and challenge them a lot more healthily. And there's a lot of opportunity for us to do all sorts.
hmm.
So it's an exciting profession.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, I mean, one of the areas as well, which we've spoken a little bit about briefly, that construction seems to be particularly grappling with is the mental health issue as well, isn't it? So, any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, we've come a long way there.
Hmm.
I mean, you can probably tell I'm struggling with a physical health thing in terms of a horrendous cold at the moment. But the thing is, the reason I use that as an example is the fact that you can see that and you can hear that in people. Yeah,
Hmm.
what's going on up here and what's maybe going on sort of inside that's a lot less obvious is always, for me, been the bigger issue. If you look at all the statistics for as long as they've been gathered, mental health and physical health have always been the bigger issues rather than the sort of mental health has always
Yeah,
been the bigger issue rather than the physical side. And um, I think I think we're in a place where we've moved along a lot. There's been a lot of focus on mental health, and now we're moving into well-being and
yeah,
understanding what that bigger picture looks like. And ultimately, I would love to be in a place where people are demonstrably better from having come to work. I mean, wouldn't that be amazing to turn around and be able to measure people in their home lives and say their home life is actually better because they came and worked for company X and they actually made things better for them, within their family and their family's life. And that would be an amazing place to be at. But small steps. It took a lot for the construction industry to start having those open and honest conversations. And in Costain, where it started, was actually a member of the SHE team, the Safety, Health and Environment team. Someone who used to work for me, actually. We have these twice yearly stand downs where the entire business basically stops for
mhm,
half a day, talks about key issues, lots of workshops, lots of discussion, but all of that gets fed back into the business, and then the business makes changes based on what they've heard from their people. And this guy turned around to me and he said, well, you know that I've just come out of the end of a nervous breakdown. He's had a terrible, terrible family history over the last 10 years. He said, I'd like to tell people about that because most people, don't know what's going on. They just see
mhm.
me as me and everything is always smiley and fine and so on. So I said, yeah, we should absolutely do that. If you're willing to stand up in front of 17,500 people altogether and tell your story, I'll support you in that.
Mm.
And that changed everything in our business. And it wasn't, this isn't all about us as Costain, but lots of
Yeah,
organisations had to have the foresight to have that first conversation, and it's just sort of it's just expanded from
yeah,
that point. But the
mm,
important thing is that whatever you do, it's got to be right for you as an organisation in terms of the way you approach it, what you supply, how you support people, the culture that you've got. You can't sort of dabble with this. You've got to mean it, and you've got to look after the people that are looking after people as well.
mm,
I always sort of think back to that first Superman film for those who are old enough to actually remember it, where Superman actually takes Lois Lane for a quick flight round the New York skyline, as you do, with your cape and your pants on the outside, and she's not completely phased about that at all. She's more phased about falling, and he says, don't worry, I've got you, and she turns around to him and says, you've got me, who's got you? And actually, that's a really good point because we've got lots of mental health first aiders out there now, CISM supporters, whatever the terminology is. But you've got to look after them as well because a lot has been done to look after the front line, but whoever's doing that looking after, they also need a support network. So businesses have found that in dealing with one thing to start with and making it more open, then actually it's become quite obvious that there's just as big a support network as you need in the physical world of safety. But we're making great strides forward, and we're having those conversations, and there's those psychologically safe environments to have it in. And I'm really pleased to see it starting to make a difference.
That's great, and I loved your point there about, aspiring that somebody goes home in a better place because they've been to work. I think that is, that's what we should all be pushing for, isn't it? And if we could achieve that, then that would be fantastic.
It really would.
That would be fantastic. Great. Well, look, Lawrence, thank you so much for sharing your insights. I've got two more things that I've got to cover with you. One is a bit of fun, and then one is we've gone from something very serious to something a bit ludicrous.
Okay.
I've got to ask you to tell a joke, and ideally a health and safety joke, because Neil Catton, he said on LinkedIn when I posted, "Who's got questions for Lawrence?" Neil said, "Just don't ask him to tell a joke." So I took that as well. I've got to ask you to tell a joke.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
keep it clean.
Well, I used to be quite proud of my dad jokes, and then I got to know Neil Catton very, very well, and I've actually hung up my spurs because I can't go into competition with him. But the one that Milton Jones told once. It's not my joke, but he started one of his stage acts with health and safety. That's a minefield. Whoa, don't tell them. And that always sort of made me laugh. But I'm afraid my jokes are much more dad jokes, like, what do you call a three-legged donkey? That were wonky. So really, but Neil Catton really has taken the gold medal, I'm afraid. So I can't compete with that.
Okay, no, fair enough. I'm going to do as a follow up to this. I'm going to do a LinkedIn thread of worst best health and safety jokes. So we'll see who can come in and take first place in that. And then lastly, then, before we wrap it up, back to slightly more serious matters. Other than the session on the 20th, anything in particular that you wanted to plug?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier. Thank you. I mentioned earlier the webinars that will be coming on neurodiversity. I mean, keep an eye out for those, because they're going to start in May, and there's one a month for 4 months. You'll see the PR coming out from IOSH. Really important area, and it will get some really good conversations going. I'm pleased about that. Myself and the other members of the presidential team, we're all going to be at all the different expos in Birmingham, London, and Farnborough. And obviously keep an eye out for branches and network events. There's some great stuff going on. They're all available on the IOSH website, so look them up, and hopefully we'll see you at one of those in the future. And another one of your sessions, of course. We were together in Edinburgh last week.
We were, and I was going to say we had it was the Edinburgh branch. We both did a little slot, and there was certainly somebody from New Zealand that was on that session. And you get people from all over the world coming along to these. That's the beauty of Zoom, I suppose, that you can now attend these things where you're not around the corner.
No, absolutely, and we're in this sort of world of where we need that healthy mix now. Face to face can't be beaten, but I tell you what, the virtual world, the world plugs in, doesn't it? And as you say, people from all over the planet. So that's a massive opportunity we need to stay tapped into. So yeah, it's a great thing.
Yeah, definitely. So do join the sessions coming up and get along to your IOSH branches. And if you're not a member, then go to the IOSH website, and I'm sure there's lots of information on there about joining. So if you listen to this podcast, then you probably should be a member of IOSH, I'd have thought.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
There we go. Good stuff. Well, thanks very much, Lawrence. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate your time. I know you're incredibly busy, so it means a lot to us that you've allocated some time for this. So thank you very much, and thanks for joining Lawrence and I. And we'll see you again on the next episode.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.